What he said on China and Russia.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man.
Governor Romney's answer, I thought, was incredibly revealing. He acts like he thinks the Cold War is still on. Russia is still our major adversary. I don't know where he's been.
China, Russia, don't worry about it, Kelsey. Don't worry about it.
Right. Those recent comments on China were quite bizarre, especially given the tough trade negotiations that are underway right now. But look, Joe Biden's foreign policy track record should absolutely be front and center on his campaign. And you don't have to go back 4 decades to actually see how problematic it is. Everything that President Trump is being criticized for by Democrats really bubbles down to rhetoric. They don't like Trump's rhetoric when it comes to Russia. But the fact of the matter, as Gates points out, is the Trump administration has been far tougher on Russia than any other administration in the past, including sanctions. And then if you look what the Obama administration's policy was towards Russia, where Joe Biden served as vice president, Crimea was taken over, and the Russia meddling actually began under the Obama administration. They were warned about that and did nothing. We have Ukraine, too. So that's just one example where I think his foreign policy track record is going to be center stage in the debate here.
You know, Mark, you're laughing, but former Assistant Secretary of State for President George W. Bush was on Fox, Robert Charles, and he pointed out that, you know, in terms of Biden's foreign policy failures, they range from opposition to military programs that brought down the Soviet Union to opposing the Osama bin Laden raid.
So when I found out the topic today, I read the entire transcript of the Face the Nation interview with Robert Gates. And in it, he criticizes Donald Trump strongly on China, on Russia, on Iran, on North Korea, on Venezuela.
But we're not talking about President Trump. We're talking about Biden.
But when you're talking about Russia and what Gates says about Russia, he doesn't say anything about Biden with Russia. In fact, he says he agrees with Biden on Libya. He agrees with Biden on Egypt. What he says on Russia is that Donald Trump is trying to prevent Congress from sanctioning Russia because he knows Russia helped him in the election and he doesn't want to stop them from helping them again. That's the bombshell here that you didn't say from the interview.
But our topic
and it's fascinating to read that.
Okay, but our topic, let's go back to Biden and his foreign policy and whether or not he'll be held accountable for any of his foreign policy blunders, which Gates did point out. He also talked about some of the military mistakes that he's made. What about that?
What Gates says is that in his memoir of 2015, he criticizes Biden on several things. And then the interviewer asks if he stands by that statement. It's interesting. Read the interview. He says, I don't know. I think I stand by that statement. And then he talks about he agreed with Biden on Libya. He agreed with Biden on Egypt. He disagreed with him with some technical points on Afghanistan. Look, Gates is a Republican, but he's a Republican who says he doesn't know if he can support Donald Trump as the Republican nominee because he lays out all of Donald Trump's foreign policy mistakes. So I really think you need to read the entire Face the Nation interview to get a full context of what Gates believes.
So, Kelsey, just the final word on Biden, since that's what we are talking about in terms of his foreign policy.
Again, I think that his foreign policy, he served as chairman of the Foreign Policy Committee in the Senate. He ran for president on his foreign policy platform, and now he's touting it once again. And he really needs to ask, name a success on the foreign policy platform, the world stage that you and the Obama administration actually had. Gates was criticizing him looking back for decades. Again, we don't need to look back for decades. Just look at the Obama administration compared to where we are now.
What about dismissing China? I mean, do you think that any investigation is forthcoming in terms of Hunter Biden and how he has profited from China specifically? Kelsey?
I think it absolutely should be investigated. If he's running for president, his records, his profits in that matter should be investigated, especially when he makes these strange comments suggesting that China's not competition right now.
And Mark, I'll give you this. I mean, he did say that at least Biden does have foreign policy experience, and he hasn't heard a lot, if anything, from any of the other potential Democratic candidates who are running in terms of foreign policy at all. We're out of time. Sorry about that.
He also said Biden had integrity, which made a distinction.
All right. Thank you both for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, the time now is about 20 minutes until the top of the hour. President Trump put the pressure on GM, and now workers at their Ohio plant will keep their jobs. Can he do the same for coal miners? Our next guest explains how the president's good policy can help rescue the Rust Belt. Welcome back. General Motors putting hundreds of Americans back to work in its Lordstown, Ohio plant, largely thanks to pressure from the president. But with 2020 looming, the White House could be on the verge of a major bipartisan victory for millions in the Rust Belt. Here to explain is Daniel Turner, president of Power the Future. Thank you so much for coming in so early. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Used to seeing you on Late Night with Tucker.
Yes.
So this is the complete opposite.
I can do all hours for Fox News.
So this is great news. Let's take a look at the facts by the numbers for you as we get started. Nearly 100,000 coal miners at risk of losing some pension money by 2022. We had 1,600 coal mining jobs that were added under President Trump through April of 2019 as well. So let's jump to that first.
Yeah, the coal industry was targeted for political reasons by the previous administration. The war on coal that President Trump talks about is a real thing for political reasons, for ideological reasons. Groups like the Sierra Club, billionaires like Michael Bloomberg targeted coal.
And we know Hillary Clinton. We remember that moment when she went there.
Yeah, and she told coal miners in Pennsylvania that she was going to put them out of business. And then she was surprised that she lost Pennsylvania to Donald Trump. So the coal industry has suffered tremendously. And there was a bipartisan piece of legislation to save the pension of these coal miners. And normally I wouldn't be in favor of a taxpayer bailout of a pension program. But this is a case where it was our government under the Obama administration that put coal miners out of work and put their pensions at risk. And I think we need to make that right.
So what about this Lordstown plant? What is happening with that?
Yeah, this is another example of how this president likes to see jobs stay in rural America, doesn't want them outsourced either to Mexico or to China. And so this GM plant that was closing, 1,700 people were at risk of losing their jobs. And he intervened and he negotiated with the GM president, and the plant was sold. And actually GM announced that they were investing several $100 million into the state of Ohio. I don't think he's doing this for purely partisan reasons or political reasons. He cares deeply about workers. And if you're a rural Rust Belt worker in Ohio or a coal miner in West Virginia, it's great to have a president on your side.
So how do you think this will play out in terms of the election moving forward?
I mean, when you look at these swing states that President Trump won in 2016, that he will need again, and we're talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, it really does come down to jobs. And to see a president who cares about manufacturing, cares about energy workers, cares about rural America, I think they're going to vote with their wallets.
So in terms of the unions, though, will they, throw their support behind President Trump?
There was an interesting phenomenon in 2016 where union leadership felt obligated to come out and support Hillary, but the members secretly said, well, we're canvassing for Hillary.
It's already happened with Biden in terms of the firefighters union.
Exactly. So the leadership may choose the Democrat nominee, whoever that's going to be, and that's traditionally where they go. But the members, the ones whose jobs are on the line, when they see a president fighting for them, whether they're coal miners or any type of energy worker or in manufacturing, they're going to vote accordingly.
It's all about jobs, and the president keeps bringing it.
Exactly.
So, all right. Thank you so much. Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
All right. Come back, please. Well, the time now is about 15 minutes until the top of the hour. Big Pharma under fire. The legal battle underway after prosecutors say that drug makers conspired to raise drug prices up to 1,000%. And Google leaning left. New evidence that the search engine's top news results all have one thing in common. Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. At Fox Business Alert for you now. Stock futures falling as China is expected to retaliate against higher tariffs the Trump administration just imposed. Tracy Carrasco from our sister network Fox Business here with what we can expect. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. We are seeing a major sell-off this morning. Dow futures now down by more than 300 points. S&P 500 futures, NASDAQ futures also pointing lower. You can see on your screen losses of more than 1%. ahead of the opening bell. This, of course, after the president's chief economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said last night that he does expect China to retaliate against the higher tariffs that the administration imposed on Friday. These were the tariffs of $200 billion, raising those tariffs to 25% from 10% on Chinese imports. The president also saying he was in the process of raising tariffs on an additional $325 billion. So he tweeted, of course, over the weekend about the developments with China. Here are a few of the tweets, but we'll be watching those futures very closely this morning. Of course, any further developments on these trade tensions with China.
Probably get a couple more tweets today.
I imagine
perhaps.
so.
Well, let's talk about Google, though. People might not find this surprising. This new study shows left-leaning sources dominate most of Google's top news sources.
Yes, this is a study from the Computational Journalism Lab at Northwestern. They have found that many of Google's top hits when it comes to news searches come from a handful of left-leaning sources. The top four, here they are: CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Fox News coming in at fourth place. So what the study found, they said, quote, "What our study decidedly cannot say is why some sources dominate on Google. They are calling on Google for more transparency on the algorithm of how these stories are curated in the news search."
Well, we dominate when it comes to viewers and cable. So
Yes.
that's what counts. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thanks, Heather.
Have a good day.
You too.
Well, this is pretty funny. You weren't the only one dodging downpours this weekend. Look at this gang of gorillas going viral for their rain dance at the Riverbank Zoo in South Carolina. One by one, you can see them shimmy along the wall, all trying to avoid getting wet. Two of them, though, sheltering new babies in their arms. The zookeeper posted this on Facebook. Gorillas are magnificent, majestic creatures full of grace and beauty, except when it rains. Didn't want to mess up their hair, you know? Well, still coming up, as it is, about 8 minutes until the top of the hour. It is Hollywood versus Georgia's heartbeat bill. You've heard about it. Celebs like Alyssa Milano, they're boycotting filming there. But how are voters reacting to backlash from some big names who don't even live in the state? And a group of bikers fulfills a Korean war vet's wish. Why this surprise ride meant much more than just a trip around town. Welcome back. 44 states sign on to a lawsuit accusing drug companies of inflating prices by more than 1,000%. And prosecutors say 20 drug makers illegally conspired to crush competition for generic medications.
We're talking about the drugs that America takes every day to live. It wasn't about product shortages. It was about profit. It was about cold, hard greed.
Well, the lawsuit aims to get the courts to stop the companies from engaging in price fixing. Hollywood pushing back against Georgia's new law that bans abortions once a heartbeat is detected. Actress and activist Alyssa Milano leading the charge, calling for actors and movie producers to boycott the state. Known for its hefty tax breaks for the industry, by the way. 3 production companies have committed to not film in Georgia. That's according to the Hollywood Reporter. This comes as other states in the South and the Midwest advance their own restrictive abortion legislation. And these states have already passed tougher abortion laws, while these states have all introduced legislation to do so. And more states are looking at tougher abortion laws despite Hollywood's pushback. And so we asked you, does this prove that voters do not want celebrities weighing in on politics? And most of you seem to agree. Carrie on Facebook writes this: Georgia should boycott Hollywood. And then Ken says, I will give up going to the movies if it saves one baby's life. Who is Hollywood to tell we Americans what we must think or do? And then a viewer on Instagram says, when celebrities believe it is within their ability to interfere in states' rights, they have stepped way over the line. Great comments. We'll continue to give us your comments on that. But in the meantime, it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we begin with the good. A biker group fulfills an 86-year-old Korean War veteran's wish to ride a motorcycle again. Now, the Patriot Guard taking former Air Force Sergeant Ben Wicker for a ride on the back of a 3-wheel bike in Utah. He's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, by the way, and he had a stroke last week. Now the bad, a 9-foot alligator spotted sitting around in an Arkansas farm field. Local wildlife experts say that it was likely displaced after heavy rains caused some nearby rivers to overflow. When a family called 911, the local sheriff actually thought it was a prank. And finally, the ugly. A Florida man is facing several charges after driving down the highway through his son.